Good afternoon and welcome to From Where We Are. Stories of news and culture through the lens of USC and Southern California. I'm Sudarshann Ramabadran coming to you live from Studio B in USC's Annenberg Media Center.
And I'm Taylor Mills. It's Monday, November 15th. On today's show, Biden's infrastructure bill, the Weekender trip, and the first Asian American Muppet on Sesame Street. All that and more from Where We Are.
For our first story, the thing everyone has been talking about this year, infrastructure.
That's right. Today's President Biden signed the more than $1 trillion bipartisan bill into law. This is after months of negotiations for it to pass both houses of Congress. And honestly, after a frustratingly slow road trip this weekend, I'm excited to see how this plays out.
So you mean to say California highways are nobody's favorite?
The 405 is definitely my beef of the week.
President Biden signed a $1.2 trillion infrastructure bill today. This includes $44.56 billion for California and $9.45 billion of it going to public transportation. We take a look at what impact that will have on LA's current and future transportation projects. Ethan Huang has the story.
Today, President Biden held a signing ceremony where he discussed the changes the bill hopes to create. In it, he promoted new investments and innovation for transportation in the United States.
It makes the most significant investment in passenger rail in the past 50 years and in public transit ever. So what that means is you're going to be safer and you're going to get there faster. And we're going to have a whole hell of a lot less pollution in the air.
For Los Angeles, this means that there are new opportunities for the future of public transportation in the city. Catherine Burke is an Emerita Associate Professor at USC's Price School of Public Policy. She says that one of the crucial issues to tackle is expanding bus services in the city.
Yes, as long as you can add more buses and bus lines and run them for more hours. One of the problems that I have a lot of friends who take buses a lot. And one of the problems is that they want to go somewhere in the evening, and it turns out the bus doesn't run after 9 o'clock at night.
Burke explains that the limitations of the current system have been a major issue for many residents relying on public transport for daily life.
There were people who had actually lost their jobs because the bus didn't come on time. They were late to work too many times and they were fired. So anything that they can do to improve this service will help a lot of people.
But this new bill raises new choices for the state. For example, the long-delayed bullet train system might tempt policymakers into favoring new projects, while current services are in need of renovation and expansion. Burke feels that they should focus on the latter.
If I were choosing, I think I would choose to improve the systems we have in urban areas. But that may be my prejudice simply because I live in an urban area.
On the other hand, Burke also feels that this bill should be used beyond major cities, by also supporting smaller regions without much access to these services.
But even bus systems are difficult to pay for in smaller cities, so we need something better that can serve all urban areas, not just places like Los Angeles and San Francisco.
This new infrastructure bill leaves the state with a large amount of money and a mountain of decisions. But there is hope that it can be used to make a more active and connected California through transportation. For Annenberg Media, I'm Ethan Huang.
Millions of students live in university-owned properties around the country. Many view them as mid to poor quality living conditions. What can be done about this? Haja Ba reports.
Students across the country have been protesting against harsh living conditions and the future of university housing in the U.S. Howard University students have been protesting for the last 30 days, demanding better living conditions. Students at the university have been living in dorms that have mold, mice, and even rodents. Chandler Robinson is a freshman at Howard who has been attending the protests since day one.
It began on October 12th. It began as a request to President Frederick to hold a town hall with students to basically just address their issues and have a conversation. He did not show up. They are trying to downplay our concerns and say that only 31 rooms are affected by mold and that it's not as bad as we say that it is. But even if there were only only 34 rooms affected by mold, which is not true. That's still an issue that needs to be addressed.
Robertson is saddened by the current climate at Howard and says as of now, she would not recommend a friend attend the university.
I would not recommend this to any of my friends just because we are fighting so hard to get what should have been available to us once we arrived. And an HBCU is supposed to be that kind of protection to the African American community because we face so much scrutiny in our day-to-day lives.
Howard Student Affairs released a statement on October 13th saying to support the students peacefully protesting and that the Office of the Student Affairs will continue providing support at this time. Here in California, there was a recent student-led protest at UC Santa Barbara after news was released that the university was set to open an 11-story windowless dorm. That left many students on campus stunned by the quote-unquote jail-like design. Camille Marquero, a third-year transfer student at UC Santa Barbara, is concerned about the future design and the recent protests that took place on campus.
Okay, so at first, I was like, oh, great, there's going to be, a new, dorm. But then when I found out that it's going to be, how do you call it, windowless, I was kind of shocked because it just feels like I'd be so kind of claustrophobic, I would say. It seems claustrophobic in a sense that their students will not be able to have the fresh air and having windows and such.
At USC, poor living conditions haven't been a current issue, but other universities in the U.S. fail to view that same reality. For Annenberg Media, I'm Hajabah.
Once a year, hundreds of USC students make the almost 400-mile trip to our Northern California football rivals, UC Berkeley or Stanford, depending on the year. This past weekend, the trip known as the Weekender led students to travel up to Berkeley. The real kicker, there was no actual football game to attend due to a COVID outbreak on the Golden Bears team. Meredith McCabe spoke with some USC students who headed up north this past weekend.
UC Berkeley Athletics canceled the highly anticipated game 4 days before the Golden Bears were set to face the Trojans at the California Memorial Stadium. Students were left with a decision: cancel their trip and forfeit money spent on non-refundable hotel rooms and plane tickets, or try to find the fun in a trip up north to beat the Bears, even though there were no Bears to be beat.
I think a lot of people already had plane tickets and set plans and reservations before they even heard that the game got canceled. So at that point it was just kind of we're already going, we might as well make a weekend of it, see some friends we might have at Berkeley.
Another USC student admitted that, for her, the trip itself and the people who go with her are the highlights of the Weekender, not the football.
I was never going to go to the game in the first place, so it didn't really change my plans. I just have some friends who go to Berkeley, so I was just going to hang out with them.
Despite there being no game, Trojans still dressed in cardinal and gold from head to toe and found fun at Cal's tailgates. Tailgates that ended in naps rather than a football game, but tailgates nonetheless.
Pretty much everybody came onto the Berkeley campus and was on Berkeley's kind of Greek row. And even though there were a bunch of different things happening and everybody was kind of coordinating with different people and you had a bunch of alum coming down as well, everybody kind of ended up, from what I saw, in the same spot.
She added that she loved the feeling of running into USC faces and instantly having the bond of the Trojan family even outside of Southern California.
There were more USC people there than Berkeley people, even though it was at their school.
The weekend left some with a question in mind. Do we even need a football game to have a good time?
I think it's more fun without a game because I don't care about football games, but I imagine for everyone else it's probably more fun if there was a football game.
This year's Weekender with no football game seemed to show that it's fun either way and it's worth the trek. Maybe it's an itch to get out of LA, or maybe it's just an excuse to tailgate with new people. The game against the Bears has been rescheduled for December 3rd. Trojan diehards are already preparing to go back up there, whether the game is canceled again or not. For Annenberg Media, I'm Meredith McCabe.
Why do people look up to professional athletes so much? And what are the impacts? Chloe Clark looks into these questions.
There's no doubt professional athletes are put under the spotlight more than the average person, like you or me. They are often magnified for their good and bad, and placed on a pedestal with high regard and influence. So how and why are pro athletes positioned as such big role models in our society? We spoke to USC's professor of sport and LA Rams defensive back Robert Rochelle for insight on this topic. USC's Professor Durbin tells how athlete influence translates beyond the realm of sport.
The rules in sports set up value expectations. It's good for you to struggle and try hard and strive. It's bad for you to be lazy. So athletes in the performance of sport always embody a set of values. Athletes today, however, aren't simply athletes. Athletes have basically three lives. They have a private life, they have an athlete's life, and they have a celebrity life.
Durbin says that when an athlete does something in their celebrity persona, it may contradict the performance of their sport. They play different roles before the public. What he talks of can be seen in players like Aaron Rodgers and Kyrie Irving with their choice to be unvaccinated. Since their values contradicted the NBA and NFL's values to promote vaccination, these events created controversy. The events also call many to highlight and question the overall responsibility of professional athletes. Rams player Robert Rochelle offers his view.
Being an athlete plays an impact on society and at the youth, the younger kids as well. It's difficult for athletes to be able to really say how they feel sometimes and move how they feel, just because of the public and how they will conceive or take what the athlete is saying. So, it's just one of those things where you got to make the best decision right then.
So is creating this dual role for athletes a logical expectation?
Athletes are expected to embody values in the performance of their sport. A lot of people get confused and think, well, that's got to go out and bleed over into the rest of their lives. They tend to think that because their first recognition of an athlete is as an athlete performing values in a sport. But an athlete in their celebrity role is like any other celebrity. You cannot force them. You cannot claim that they must exemplify your values when they're not playing the sport, because they're out of that value performance that they do within the sport.
So between performing values in sport, playing the role of celebrity, and living out their own private existence, many do believe athletes shouldn't be expected to act exemplar in all realms. This echoes Charles Barkley's sentiments in a 1993 Nike ad where he said, "I'm not paid to be a role model. I am paid to wreak havoc on the basketball court."
I am not a role model. I'm not paid to be a role model. I am paid to wreak havoc on the basketball court. Just because I dunk a basketball doesn't mean I should raise your kids.
Almost 30 years after Barkley's commercial, there still seems to be even more pressure and expectation placed by society that pro athletes must carry themselves in a manner both on and off the field that positively impacts the public.
It's being an athlete and having that type of impact, you would always bring back backlash one way or another. There's always going to be a big controversy about everything because, they feel like we should always do the right thing of the world, always should follow what the law says. But, we're still human as well. We still should have a say-so over our lives.
For Annenberg Media, I'm Chloe Clark.
I'm Sudarshann Ramabadran. We are glad you're with us for From Where We Are.
And I'm Taylor Mills. It's 14 minutes past the hour. Coming up, we'll hear about a funk band that started here at USC. Stay with us.
Traveled underground, whiskey, water, and tears. Thought that we would drown, Jolene. 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 Raining everywhere.
From Herb Alpert to Macy Gray, USC has a legacy of producing remarkable musical alumni. Here's the story of Thumpasaurus, the once cult campus party band composed of 4 jazz school prodigies and a film school frontman. They grew up together on campus. Now their signature art funk sound and avant-garde stage shows have reached far beyond frat row. Eva B. Ross caught up with frontman Lucas Tamarin after their sold-out show at the Lodge Room to learn about how Thump began and where they're headed.
It's Saturday night in Highland Park. The lobby of the Lodge Room is quaking with a maximum capacity crowd, and they're masked up. They're here to see Thumpasaurus. Thumpasaurus is a punk-funk band, known as much for their shredding musicality as they are for their over-the-top live act. For years, they've been selling out shows, opening for iconic indie acts and playing international tours. But before all that, they were 5 students at USC. And Lucas Tamarin wasn't yet a frontman, he was a freshman, studying film.
I did love that it was an opportunity to talk about art and visuals and just meet other excited kids. And no one really knew what they were doing, which was awesome.
Tamarin grew up in St. Louis. When he got to Los Angeles, he was inspired by the creative culture he found on campus.
At school, I saw like all these kids doing music and loving it and like studying music, telling you in a serious conversation that they were pursuing music. And that was such a pipe dream. And to be around that energy was very encouraging.
He started playing in a campus folk band called The Neighbors. It was there he met drummer Henry Was, who was studying music production, and together they booked house shows at fraternities on campus.
I got to plug in. Quickly there started to be like a schism between folk and like the rock and roll mentality of like, let's just like party.
The new sound was transformed by the addition of a few standouts from the Thornton School of Music. Now there was Henry Solomon on sax, Logan Kane on bass, and Paul Cornish on keys.
They just sat in at one of these house parties, and they were in jazz school, which was super rigorous, and it's a great jazz program, but like it also just had this different sort of energy, I think, these house parties than like what they were experiencing their whole lives of conservatory training. We kind of became like the party band at USC.
They called themselves Thumpasaurus.
When I say thump, you say saurus. Thump! Saurus! Thump!
Thump built a loyal following on campus and in Los Angeles. They played in backyards and at campus underground venues. In years since, they've traveled the world, and their videos have racked up hundreds of thousands of views. But wherever they go, the music community they met at USC remains with them.
At school, I was much more like bitter at the time of being like, F school. And I left school, and I came back to finish, but I'm super stoked I went to school now, especially. We're different than we were when we were in our early 20s, but we still have that as our roots and our foundation and that brotherhood and shared friendship.
Thumpasaurus is set to release new music this fall, and they head out on tour in October.
Like the whole project is like a test in like just trying to find like personal freedom within like the chaos of being a human.
You never know what to expect at a Thumpasaurus show. Maybe a leather cowboy will strut around the stage, or aliens will play a face-melting solo. Wherever the show goes, we know where it started. For Annenberg Media, I'm Eva B. Ross.
Following the worldwide hype over the Netflix show Squid Game, the cast landed on the red carpet at a Los Angeles screening in Hollywood this month. Now, we're well aware of its popularity, but we wonder how a South Korean show came to be so popular around the world, and what can we expect in Season 2? Line Show has the story.
Released back in September, the hype around Squid Game is slowly dying down, but it's left fans making their own taegona and inspired influencers to cook their own Squid Game-inspired meals. Approaching a festive season past games and gore, it's the perfect time to address why this show is so popular.
I think we love dystopian films. I think that's what it is, and I think we like seeing a lot of wealth, too.
That was Mallory Wilson, a freshman studying international relations. She emphasized the popularity of a rags-to-riches story in any context. No matter how violent and gory it is, viewers like her enjoy seeing the competition.
Like if you think of like the Hunger Games, it's the same kind of idea where you see it like a competition and you see like, you know, like a hierarchy of these like fantastical, like really, really wealthy people.
From adversity comes tears and a moment of reflection. Certainly fans were aghast with the vigorous violence and non-stop terror. However, behind the surreal portrayal of a secret island full of mysteriously masked figures in jumpsuits and their audacious propensity for death, there lives a real world of hopeless poverty and destitute dreams.
The contradiction with normal life is children games and you turn into something really bloody and scary.
Arwen Zhang, a junior studying applied math and data science, shared her thoughts about Squid Game's rising fame because of the multi-dimensional characters.
Like the characters there was really comprehensive. They all have their own stories and stuff. I think that's another reason, like the show as like an art piece itself.
The visual portrayal of gunshot wounds, abrupt deaths, and devalued life raised concerns for viewers around the world. Contestants are potentially trapped in a room with an ultimatum to win under their best personal interest. Their desperation to win stems from their realization that they have nothing to lose because the contestants are considered close to death on debt out in the real world. Mallory shared the most memorable moment throughout the show that reflected the despairingly heroic Sang-woo and Ki-hoon, the two finalists who played the so-called Squid Game in the end to single out the recipient of the $38 million. Weak and on the brink of death, Sang-woo willingly sacrificed himself for his childhood friend Ki-hoon.
When he kills himself to let the other guy win, I think that's the most emotional moment, just because you see the sacrifice there, and like the caring for one another, even when the stakes are so high.
Fans will remember that Ki-hoon unintentionally got on Sang-woo's nerves by telling everyone about his prestigious background, when in reality, all contestants are playing the game because they made bad decisions and need the money. But seeing how things turned out, we can only expect Sang-woo's sacrifice to serve as a catalyst for Ki-hoon in the next season. That's right, director Hwang Dong-hyuk left a lot of fans excited by confirming Squid Game Season 2, with Season 1 ending on a cliffhanger, literally with Junho, the undercover cop, falling from a cliff. Most fans are excited to see what will happen next. Will Ki-hoon re-enter the Squid Game as a contestant or as the new frontman? What is the story behind the lonesome salesman who goes around recruiting contestants? Are you excited? I know that I've been waiting since I finished the last episode 2 months ago. For Annenberg Media, I am Naim Cho.
I can't watch season 1 now because it's all been spoiled, but that's no matter. The iconic children's show Sesame Street is set to introduce an Asian American Muppet for the first time. Sesame Street has been on the air since 1969. The new Muppet's name is Ji Young. She's supposed to be Korean American, and she'll make her big debut on Thanksgiving Day. Miriam Alcala has the story.
That's Ji Young, a supposedly 7-year-old guitar-playing, skateboarding Korean American Muppet. It's about time Sesame Street has an Asian American Muppet, says Mary Murphy. She's a USC professor specializing in pop culture.
I think it's so long for Hollywood, for entertainment, for pop culture, to introduce Asian characters. I think it took Sesame Street a long time because it took everyone a long time. And finally, they are realizing that they have to evolve. I mean, Cookie Monster is doing meditation. And now they have a South Korean character. So this, for me, is a moment that Sesame Street, like the rest of Hollywood, is pivoting.
Sesame Workshop, which produces the show, says Ji Young will play a role in countering the increasing amount of anti-Asian bias and harassment in the U.S. This new character is part of Sesame Street's initiative called Coming Together. This move against racial injustice began in 2020 after the murder of George Floyd and an increased awareness in America of racism. Mei Lee is a Korean-American broadcast journalist and host who has worked in Asia.
Well, I think this goes to show that sometimes it takes a crisis in our society for people to wake up about things that maybe they never paid attention to before. And even something like Sesame Street that has always tried to be educational. I think it took something like the anti-Asian hate, crisis that started in 2020 for even Sesame Street to realize that this was an invisibilized community that needed a spokesperson. And so it's great that they're finally able to see that and know that this is an important identity to pay attention to.
Lee believes that the media can be and should be a powerful tool to shape our society's values.
It has to start with educating young people about the world and about different communities and people who are different and unique and bring something different to the table. And so through education, we can raise awareness, better understanding, and of course, eventually empathy. And if children grow up knowing this at a young age, they can grow up and be shaped to move through the world.
USC professor Mary Murphy says that she's not surprised that the Sesame Workshop made their first Muppet of Asian descent Korean American.
Everywhere across the pop culture media, Korean product is popular. You have BTS, you have Squid Game, you have Parasite that won. This is the moment. And Sesame Street has captured the moment, which I think is very smart.
Diversity is smart, but Asia is a vast territory comprising of many cultures. Ji Young is a good start to making children's television more representative, more inclusive, one Muppet at a time. Her name, Ji Young, means smart and wise, brave and courageous.
She's a woman of intelligence.
Yeah, that's my dream one day, to just have a director's chair with my name on it. Ji Young.
Ji Young.
Yeah, it just...
That'd be terrific.
Once again, that was Miriam Alcala reporting on that story. Journalists have to ask tough, often invasive questions. It's a fact I myself have become familiar with in Annenberg media covering the sexual assault allegations on USC Frat Row. So how does sensitivity to trauma stories work when producing hard news?
From Where We Are's producer Val Diaz is helping organize an online event through Annenberg with several media experts to address this issue. Well, thank you so much for talking with us today.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
So, well, tell us, why are you hosting this event now?
Well, this event is really timely for the USC community, as we've had several instances this semester where reporting on really sensitive topics has come across a lot of our reporters. And I feel like it's important to have this conversation now, because the sooner we have it, the sooner we'll be able to fix our mistakes, get a good course of action, and be better journalists and people.
You talk about mistakes. What insensitive coverage have you seen personally pertaining to trauma victims or sensitive topics?
Recently, there was a DPS report about sexual assault on Frat Row, something that has been covered on the show as well. And I believe that a lot of people witnessed a lot of different news organizations from outside of LA and places that just came in and decided to shove cameras and microphones in people's faces without regarding their humanity or if they had to relieve trauma. So I feel like that's something that a lot of us witnessed here at Annenberg, and I feel it's something that we have to make sure we don't grow up to be.
So what do you hope to achieve with this event?
I think we hope to achieve understanding, learning, and comprehension of how to cover these topics, how to cover dealing with trauma, and how to cover interviews with like human decency and keeping that rapport with our subjects, because they're human too, and even if we want to get information from them, we have to treat them as people first.
And Val, real quick, how and when can people join this conversation?
They can join in through an RSVP link that's located in Annenberg Media's website, and it's tomorrow, Tuesday, at 12 p.m. to 1:30 p.m.
That was our producer, Val Diaz. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you for hosting me.
And that's all we have time for on today's From Where We Are. Celine, Mendiola and Val Diaz produced today's show. Wilko, Martinez, Martinez-Cachero runs our live stream.
Val Diaz runs our soundboard, and Derek Renfroe composed our theme music.
We stream live on KXSC, kxsc.org/listen. I'm Sudarshann Ramabadran.
And I'm Taylor Mills. From all of us here at Annenberg Radio, wherever you are, thank you for listening. We hope you'll join us again on From Where We Are.